Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back to the second bonus video of December. In today's game, Mackenzie, Mika, and Maximus have joined me. Mackenzie's built a new deck that he's hoping to try out, with Korvold, Gleeful Glutton, keeping Command Tower, Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, Roiling Regrowth, Swamp, and a Perennial Behemoth. Mika is playing his tried but true Sidar Jabari, keeping Wonder, Soul Ring, Swamp, Exotic Orchard, Terramorphic Expanse, Hakon, Stromgald Scourge, and a Murderous Rider. Maximus has built Samut as Naya tokens, keeping Forest, Plains, Mountain, Assemble a Legion, Balaged Recovery, and a Branchloft Pathway. Last but not least, I am testing out my Ramos Mutate deck once more, keeping Flames of Anor, Force of Negation, Breeding Pool, Season of Growth, Overgrown Tomb, Plains, and a Soul Ring. Mackenzie wins the die roll and starts us off.
Okie dokie, artichoke.
He draws and plays a Riveteer's Overlook, sacrificing it, gaining 1 life, and then going to search for a basic. I just play a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Max plays a Mountain and passes. Mika plays Terramorphic Expanse and passes as well. Mackenzie plays a Swamp and then casts an Arcane Signet. He then taps the Signet for a Soul Ring and passes to me. I play a Plains and cast Soul Ring. I then tap the rest of my mana for a Season of Growth and pass. Maximus plays a Forest and passes, while Mika sacrifices his Terramorphic Expanse to go and find an island. Mika doesn't want to be left out, so he plays his own Soul Ring and then casts Swamp. He's still got enough for a Smitten Swordmaster though, and he passes once that resolves. Mackenzie draws and taps enough for a Perennial Behemoth. He then plays the Riveteer's Overlook from his yard, once more sacrificing it, gaining 1, and going to find a basic tapped. I draw and play a tap Steam Vents, passing to Max. Maximus plays a Plains, and then pays 3 for Kadama's Reach. He goes to find a basic for the field which comes in tapped, and 1 for his hand. Mika plays a Plains for turn, and then goes at Max with the Swordmaster. He gets the Eminence trigger, drawing a card and discarding Wonder, and the Knight then connects, gaining him 2 life. Mika then taps enough for Sidar Jabari, and passes after that. Mackenzie taps enough in his main phase to cast a Roiling Regrowth, sacrificing a land to go and grab 2 more. And before searching, he plays from his graveyard the Riveteer's Outlook, sacrificing it and going to find a basic at the same time. He then passes after that. I play a Watery Grave, taking 2 so it'll come in untapped. I'm then able to tap enough for Ramos, and I get to scry 1 as it comes in. I choose to bottom the card and pass to Maximus. Maximus has a Plains and just passes after that. Mika plays a Sunken Hollow, which comes in untapped because he has 2 or more basics, and then casts Marshal of Zhalfir. He moves to combat, swinging the Swordmaster at Mackenzie and his Commander at me. He gets his on attack trigger, drawing a card and discarding a Valiant Knight. I then take the first strike hit, and Mika gets to bring back the Valiant Knight thanks to Sidar Jabari's second ability. Normal damage then resolves, with the Swordmaster having now gained +1/+1, and Mika gains that much life. He then passes after that. Mackenzie casts Invasion of Lorwyn, which as it enters, destroys the Valiant Knight. He has Maximus defend the battle, and Mackenzie then plays a Hammer of Purphoros. He moves to combat, and swings the Behemoth at his battle. Maximus decides not to block by flashing in Samut, and Mackenzie takes 2 counters off his battle. With nothing else, he passes. My turn has Rejuvenating Springs come in, and I then play a Robe of Stars. During my end step, Maximus flashes in Samut. Maximus asks for the amount of cards in hand, and after finding out the largest hand is 4, casts Jessica's Will, gaining 4 red and exiling his top 3. He then casts from exile a Doubling Season, and then plays from hand Exotic Orchard. Once that's out, he casts the Path to Exile that's in exile, and targets Sidar Jabari. Mika's commander goes to the command zone, and Mika goes to find a basic as a result. Moving to combat, Max then swings his commander at Mika, who takes the double strike hit, and then Max passes. Mika plays a Plains and gets some revenge with his Swordmaster, dealing 3 to Max and gaining 3. He then plays a Crashing Drawbridge, and he passes after that. Mackenzie pays 3 for Peregrine Took in his main phase, and then drops Greta Sweet Tooth Scourge. She makes a food token as she enters, which because of Peregrine Took means he actually makes 2. Mackenzie then does his Riveteer's Outlook synergy, gaining 1 and finding a basic. He then activates the Hammer of Perforos, sacrificing a land to make an artifact golem enchantment creature, plus makes another food token. He then swings Greta at the battle to take it out, which Max bluffs a block, but ultimately lets go through. This has Mackenzie casting the other side, which is a Winnowing Forces. He then passes turn. During his end step, I cast Flames of Anor, picking the mode to draw 2 cards and adding 2 +1/+1 counters to Ramos. I draw and play Dragonskull Summit. I equip Ramos with the Robe of the Stars, and then go to combat. I hit Mackenzie for 7 with my commander, and pass after that. Max plays Command Tower, and then taps 5 to cast Gilded Lotus. He then taps it and his remaining lands for Assemble the Legion. He declares he'll move to combat, and in response, Mika removes that as an option by using his Marshal to tap down Samut. With nothing else, Max passes. Mika untaps and draws. He plays a Tainted Field, and then taps enough to recast his commander. Once Sidar Jabari is out, he then taps the Crashing Drawbridge to give him haste. Mika then moves to combat, and his commander goes at Max, while the Swordmaster goes at Mackenzie. He draws and discards from the Eminence trigger, and his commander then deals 5 to Max from first strike. Once more the Valiant Knight comes in before normal damage, and Mackenzie then takes a slightly larger hit, while Mika gains some life. Mika then passes after that. Mackenzie draws and uses the hammer again to sacrifice a land and make another golem token and a food token. He then taps enough mana to cast Taste of Death, and I respond by phasing out Ramos. Everyone then sacrifices 3 creatures, and Mackenzie makes a bunch of food tokens. Moving to combat, he swings the Winnowing Forces at me, and Peregrine Took and the Behemoth at Mika. Before moving to blocks though, Mika flashes in Liliana's Standard Bearer. He resolves the Enter the Battlefield trigger, drawing 3, and then blocks Peregrine Took. Before moving to damage, Mackenzie sacrifices 3 food tokens to draw a card, and Peregrine Took is then taken out. With nothing else, he passes to me. Ramos faces back in, and I play a Swamp. I then play a Birds of Paradise, adding another +1/+1 counter to Ramos, and then I move to combat. I swing my commander at Mika, dealing 8. I then realize I should have scryed from the birds coming in, and do so, bottoming it while I pass to Max. Max adds 2 counters to his Assemble the Legion, and then makes 4 tokens. He draws for turn, and plays a Forest. We then see Balaged Recovery resolving, and he returns Path to Exile to his hand. With nothing else, he passes to Mika. Mika asks about creatures in our graveyards, to which Mackenzie has the only one. He then plays an Exotic Orchard as his land for turn, and then casts Rally the Ranks, naming Knight. He goes to combat, swinging Sidar at Mackenzie, and getting to draw a card and discard a card. Mackenzie then takes the 6, and Mika then brings back Hakan with Sidar Jabari's second trigger. In his second main phase, Mika casts History of Benalia, making a 2/2 Knight token. With nothing else, he passes. Mackenzie draws and taps enough to cast the Gitrog monster, and then taps enough to use the hammer and sacrifices a land. He draws a card from the land hitting his graveyard with the Gitrog monster, and makes that 3/3 golem token. He then plays the command tower from his graveyard thanks to the Behemoth. He then taps 2 mana for Reap, and returns to hand Peregrine Took and the Roiling Regrowth. He passes, and during his end step, I cast Esper Charm and pick the mode to draw 2 cards. I also get to add 3 +1/+1 counters to Ramos. I untap and draw for turn. I remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos to make 2 of each color of mana, and then use some of it to first mutate Cavern Whisperer onto Ramos. Max responds by casting Path to Exile and targets my commander, but I respond to that by hard casting Force of Negation to counter it. The mutate then goes off, and my opponents discard a card, and I get to draw a card from Season of Growth. I then play out Baby Godzilla, adding another counter to Ramos, and then pay the reduced cost for a mutated Dirgebat onto Ramos. This gets me a bunch of triggers, the first of which is me drawing a card and discarding one from Baby Godzilla, and I then draw a card from Season of Growth. My opponents then discard a card, and despite the fact that this all started because of the Dirgebat, I somehow forget that mutate trigger. I then cast Gwenna, adding another counter onto Ramos. I get to scry 1 as well thanks to Season of Growth, seeing the creature come in. Moving to combat, Mika makes a deal with Maximus to have him attack me if he taps down my Ramos, which Max readily agrees to. Mika then does so, and with no good attacks, I pass turn. During my end step, Max flashes in Samut. Max adds 2 more counters to his Assemble, and then makes 8 soldier tokens with haste. He taps 7 mana in his main phase for an Avenger of Zendikar, which as it comes in, makes 16 plant tokens. He then plays Temple of the False God, adding 2 +1/+1 counters to all the plants. They've got haste thanks to Samut, and Max then goes to combat, swinging his entire hasty plant army at me, and the 12 1/1 soldier tokens at Mackenzie. I double block to at least take out one of the plants, but still die unfortunately to the rest. Mackenzie blocks 3 soldiers and takes the 9. Maximus then passes as he has no cards in hand, and during his end step, Mika flashes in Liliana's Standard Bearer from his graveyard thanks to Hakan. Mika untaps and makes another Knight token on his upkeep as he adds a lore counter to his saga. He then casts the Valiant Knight from his graveyard thanks to Hakan, and then he activates it to give his team double strike. Mika then does some quick math to see how much damage he'll deal, which in theory is enough to take out both Mackenzie and Maximus. He's able to just swing Sidar Jabari at Mackenzie, and the rest go at Maximus. Maximus uses Samut to untap a soldier token, but then realizes that all of Mika's stuff has flying because of Wonder being in the graveyard, and knows that he can't block, and everyone gets taken out during combat. Game review time. This game was 50 minutes and 5 seconds, and the length of a game that is also a palindrome just tickles me in a fun way. I already feel a lot better about changing Otrimi back into Ramos. Ramos originally felt kind of convoluted in very kind of 2 directions, wanting to play a lot of charms and also mutates at the same time. I think I've refrained from doing that too much. I've got the charms that draw me cards, and I have the mutate cards, and I have protection cards. This is a bit more focused, and I think it just works a little bit better. This wasn't the best game to show it though, but I've got a few more in the pipeline that are coming out that will. Mackenzie was missing a critical piece, and that was a sack outlet for his Korvold deck. He had basically every type of permanent that he could possibly want, and the Hammer of Perforos was going to give him so much value if only he was able to get rid of the token at his own step. Without that, he was basically at the mercy of sacrificing only a land and an artifact being the food token to help reduce Korvold's cost by a little bit. This just didn't help him too much, and that's probably why Korvold didn't come out this game. Maximus's Samut deck is just a generic token deck in Naya colors. Samut's great because she allows him to untap massive mana generators and give haste in the command zone, which is just valuable. Mika's Knight deck was so resilient, although I think one well-timed Bajuka Bog might have put a bit of a stop to him. Having Wonder in his graveyard from the get-go was just brutal, and that Valiant Knight came back so often. I love to see this kind of stuff. It also pleases me to see traditional shards like Esper being focused heavily on control, being something more aggro-centric, which is exactly what Sidar Jabari brings to the table. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.